Greetings and welcome to West Fox. Today's topic is movie, math, numbers, profit, loss, and all that good stuff. So,
math?
Yes, we are joined by Southhound here, and who is actually has a degree now. I think official, right? Close to an official degree in.
But I do know what I'm doing
in accounting. So in movies like that's come up recently, such as Birds of Prey, and actually there's a whole stream of movies in this last year. You know, it was Charlie's Angels, Dark Phoenix, Dark Fate. Obviously, darkness is a theme. MIB International, Ghostbusters was 2016. You know, Rise of Skywalker, a bunch of movies that were talked about heavily when it came to what it's made and the marketing behind it. So, really, if you look at it, there's two different sides of how Hollywood views the marketing of its numbers. So there's the kind of audience-facing side, which is, oh, this movie made a ton of money, go see it, support us because we want to make more money, so they're going to put the high numbers out there. And then on the back end, there's kind of the opposite side of that. So there's a lot of movies that actually are considered still in the red, even though they've been around for a long time. There's a just recent article in No Film School talking about how people that were supposed to get back-end deals, percentage of points off of profits on it, have never got any money from the movie because it's still considered to have losing money to this day, nearly 20 years later, I believe. And so that's the whole, profit loss thing. So a lot of times movies...
That's some good sleight of hand.
It really is.
On the accounting side.
It really is.
It is rather impressive.
If you really think about it too, most people, people think of studios as kind of an entity, and they are an entity, but they also get private financing for most a lot of times they have private investment firms that are geared towards movies, lending them the money to make the movie. So it's a whole weird kind of game on that. And so what we just wanted to talk about a little bit today was kind of the profit and loss from the best numbers you can get, because the industry is very opaque when it comes to the honesty of what it's making in a movie. Because other than what they want you to see and hear about in the marketing side, they said, go see the movie, it made a lot of money, it means people like it, obviously, or not always, but it's designed to do that. So a great example of that is China. So a lot of times movies like Transformers is a huge example of that, where it made over $1 billion, I think, alone in China, and at least one of the two of them. And then the America box office was actually quite small. But they're still touting that as a huge amount of money, even though that in China, generally they make a much smaller percentage of the box office return. So just because an estimate, so the ticket average price on most movies, and this is the average, I think it's a little higher from everywhere I've been. This is what I would consider probably including matinee prices, dollar. I don't even know how they get this number, to be honest, but right now the average ticket price, which is considered, is $9.26. So $9.26. So if we round out to $10 on average, and there's different deals. So like example would be The Last Jedi. Disney had made a special deal saying if you want to show the movie, you have to give us 70% of the box office tickets. So that was really above the normal. So in general, it's about 60%. So no matter when you go and spend $10 at a movie, the theater gets $4 of that, and then the studio, and how that trickles down, gets about 60% of it. So right off the top, any movie that makes a lot of money is automatically losing 40% of that. And so that's what's kind of interesting when you start looking at the breakdowns of these movies and profits. So recently Birds of Prey came out, and there's a mixture of people trying to both say it's one side will say, oh, it's a terrible failure, and another side will go, oh no, it's a great financial success. And when you look at the numbers, you go, no, they're definitely losing money. There's pretty much no way that you're going to see them recoup it. So I'm going to highlight that here in the Excel spreadsheet. Oop, wrong button. Bloop. There you go. And so the movie budget that's presented is $100 million. So that's where, as you start seeing these red ones, you're going to see that most of these red lines, being the movie being in the red, it's a term for the books saying it's lost money, versus in the black, which means it's made money. The movies that have high budgets obviously have to make more money, and so they have a lot more marketing. So marketing and movie budgets are also a lot of estimation, because there's not a lot of, always again, transparency there. There's a certain level of, this is what it says, but doesn't mean that it's completely true. But so like example that would be later on when we look at Rise of Skywalker, which I think is way under what they actually spent because they didn't talk about anything, including reshoots. So, and again, Birds of Prey also had reshoots, and I don't think that was included in this number. So, the baseline estimate is about $100 million to make this movie, and on general they say double that for your marketing. But I think the estimates and having level of ranges is a huge advantage. And it comes to kind of analyzing things, looking at, okay, what's the worst case scenario and best case scenario? And then you can always just go higher too. So you could always say, okay, they even spent more than that. So if they spent between $50 and $100 million in marketing, that puts the movie's total cost between $150 to $200 million. Now, this movie's still out, but its initial box office globally was about $83 million. And I don't think Tuesday's receipts have come out yet, but you could, round up $85 million. Of that, they keep approximately $50 million, which then you put that into the formula, which is nothing more than, simple addition and subtraction. And they've either lost a date or their current loss will be between $150 and $100 million. And then you look at kind of this ticket price. So what I've taken is kind of your average ticket price divided against the box office receipts to give an idea of what L6 versus H. Yeah, I want to make sure I was using the right number there. So that's the numbers that are dividing against. So approximately on estimate, this movie has had about roughly 9.9 million people view it. So this movie obviously is probably one of the biggest failures so far, but not the biggest so far, because you look at what other movies have done. And what's interesting, and I was looking at the numbers here, and this is not an exhaustive list of movies, but they're the more recent high profile losses. And what's interesting is you start looking at these numbers and is you see kind of patterns. So you have two major kind of, at least in the marketing, kind of very highly feminist / anti-man movie marketing. And so you see this about 9 million people have seen it. And you go down to Charlie's Angel, which kind of had a similar vein. Similar things being said by the director and people in the cast, and you have a very similar number, about 7.6 million. So you can kind of round that to like a 10 million mark of people who will go see these movies kind of regardless if they're good or bad, approximately. And then what's interesting is when you kind of jump into this next kind of tier of movies. We have Dark Phoenix,
which, the Dark Phoenix, the Dark Fate, those kind of have a built-in subscriber base, I guess you could say. I mean, the first Terminator movies, number 1 and 2, of course, created what we consider, the kind of cult classic horror genre that was created, and then every other movie since has
action
slowly
adventure,
lost
I call it
people.
horror, but yeah, action adventure, kind of like dystopian future.
Oh, I'd call it. The first one's horror.
I mean, maybe
Yeah. It's, apocalyptic movies nowadays almost looked so shiny compared to that. Not to mention, although the score I hate, it's one of the worst ones ever. It's like terrible choice. It would have made it so much better. But yeah, so like in Dark Phoenix, you got your X-Men groupies, which have existed since the first one, when they were kind of generally mediocre movies. They weren't completely terrible, but they also weren't anything worthwhile to take home to mom. After Terminator 1 and 2, there was a steep decline, but you still had a kind of a built-in base of people who wanted to go see those movies. And of course, Ghostbusters is another perfect example. People loved those movies.
Yeah,
that was a built-in fan base.
And you see
that's
that number
why you can see those numbers significantly
around.
higher.
Well, that's what you see. You see these numbers run around the same, between 20, let's just say approximately 30 million, 25 to 30 million.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's almost like there's this, again, built-in fan base, or just a certain percentage of people that see, there might be the regulars, that kind of regular people that go, okay, it's a weekend, let's go see a movie. What's the current flavor of the month?
We should have had a Captain Marvel in there.
Well,
how did we forget that?
That is true. And that would have been a good example to just juxtapose that. So we'll have to throw in the future, we'll throw that one into this kind of graphing as we mark this stuff. But what's interesting, again, is the budgets. You're seeing this thing. So Charlie's Angel was actually a decent budget. That movie actually should have made money. Again, granted, I think it was a reboot that no one really asked for or wanted. But again, I think that budget, if it had been a movie that more, or the marketing had geared towards a more of an audience, I think you would have seen possible returns, because that one's only loss of between $40 to $60 million, which compared to most of these movies on the list is actually not bad. Obviously, the lowest one, actually surprising to me, was MIB International, which estimates between 13 to about 70 million loss on it.
Yeah, and there you go. Men in Black, another one that had a built-in fan base.
And only about, again,
already
very similar numbers in the sense of people going, I mean, look at those numbers. I mean, we're talking, now granted, this doesn't give quite the breakdown for different countries in here, for the global, but I mean, again, you look at your domestic, the big one that's a big change on this one, again, is actually Black Panther, which actually has most actually of these movies have a higher global or international box office total of all the countries than the United States box office. But Black Panther was kind of an anomaly in that, where the domestic box office was vastly superior, or actually not vastly, but in general, well, individually countries, it was vastly superior. But it was a huge box office win, and it was for the studio, you look at what it made domestically at 700 million. Not only other movie that even hits that level, which is interesting. I'm surprised that Infinity, look at the numbers.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Mm-hmm.
Infinity War. Where's the other? I thought I had Endgame and Infinity. Yeah,
you do.
The only other one. Okay, Endgame.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I guess I crunched those numbers a little bit too much on the space.
And that's why I would have been curious to see the Captain Marvel, because, Black Panther, although it was relatively successful, when you compare it to, if we would have compared it to all the Marvel movies, I know it made more money than most. And of course, that was partially a massive amount of political charge that came attached to that movie. So that was one of the big reasons why that was.
I think it was a C movie. I mean, not C. Great. I would give it higher than a C.
It was a C movie.
I'd give it higher than that personally. I think that the end wasn't as strong as it could have been. So domestic here, I'll put Captain Marvel in here really quick. So its global box office was 1.128274.
And that's pretty on par with the global for Black Panther.
And then we'll adjust those numbers here. And then we have our U.S. box office, which was 426, 8.
So this is where I would say that
29.
When it comes to the political side, the anti-man feminist trope is far more grating to people than the race baiting necessarily. I think people are still, no one's okay with having to have to confront that. Anti-man, people seem to be a little bit more worthwhile to avoid, but not that. And that's why I think part of the reason is you see Black Panther, which was a mediocre movie, on par for Marvel movies.
Yeah, because you put Marvel movies a lot lower than I probably do in general.
I do. They're boring, man. They're boring. I mean, Iron Man 1 still rings bells for me every time. But I think after those, when you really tear them down, 2 and 3 were terrible. I'd say the first Avengers was half.
I would say most
bad.
fall into between 2 and 3 was just a bad. I mean,
that was bad. That was just a
3 was bad
movie.
I think that
2 was boring.
2 was just okay,
and it didn't make any sense. But
so there's your kind of numbers for. Let's see why that's so small here. There's your kind of number breakdown for. Oh, why is that smaller? 10. There we go.
You just copied the format. Yeah, there you go.
So that actually they actually made pretty good money. Again, it's surprising that they've announced a Captain Marvel 2 movie. Oh, that's it changed to black. That actually
could just be bluster.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that going on right now. But you look at the numbers and go, okay, it looks like they're actually similar in the sense of profit. That's again because they were smart and didn't blow the budget on a ridiculous level. And I don't think there was a bunch of reshoots on that movie either, which was good. Again, reshoots do happen, and I know there's some padding in the studios when they do this stuff for that.
Right.
To fix.
No, the reshoots that would have been involved Captain Marvel would have probably been more with Endgame than it would have been with her actual movie.
Yeah, and Endgame actually cost more than, at least according to the internet here, it cost more than Infinity War, which surprises me, unless that counts for the. It's hard. I guess it's probably hard. I wonder there's some marketing in there because I think they filmed them around the same time, so it wouldn't surprise me if they kind of balance costs off onto one to the other as they're filming some of the stuff. Because when you have a movie that has so many of the same cast members. Look at Lord of the Rings. They were smart and spent. They filmed all 3 movies in a year, and then went back and did all the post visual effects and visual effects. And I'm sure there was a decent amount of filming because, digital sets and stuff like that they had to do.
Sure.
So there's probably still some level of reshooting, but I don't think it's the same level that you're seeing nowadays. I would definitely be interested to see something like, how much the actual cost of a movie like Rise of Skywalker here. Because I honestly don't believe that 275 budget that the internet has out there. I would say it's...
That's such a lie.
I would put that probably... I'd add 100 million to that budget, most likely. And when you do that, it does show that they probably made a little bit of money. Again, I don't know how much they spend in marketing. The one thing I'll say on that movie, if I put that 375, that puts them either losing money or making a little bit. So if you add that 100 million, you'll see that right here, and this is more what I think it actually probably cost money-wise, you'll see that they're right on the edge. And I think that's probably pretty an honest take on it, in the sense of the cost, is that it might have made some money, but is right on that edge there. And because I don't market, like one other thing the reason I say that is because the marketing cost between, I put the 50 to 100%. I didn't, I know a lot of people are like, oh, they spend so much money in marketing, but I didn't feel like they actually spent that much because they didn't have a long run of marketing. They put out a trailer 8 months before. They just put a trailer out there and then just let it run on the internet and YouTube and let people talk about it. And they put another trailer out before it. And I know they did a lot of TV spots.
There were a bunch of mini trailers at the end.
Yeah, but mostly on their own networks.
Bunch.
They own Hulu.
That's true.
I mean, I'm not saying they didn't spend any money, of course. I just don't know if they actually spent another 300 million instead of, 375 million on marketing. They probably spent more along that 200, let's see what my numbers came to. So like the lower end of 50% is 185 or 187.50. I bet they spent more along the lines of 225 on this marketing. I could be wrong because they did so many. I don't know how they break in marketing costs into stuff because they had their internal shows that they marketed on. Almost every show had some kind of Star Wars tie-in prior to the movie.
Right.
I also don't know.
Well, they may not even include those things.
They might not include. They might include it. It's a loss.
I mean,
right?
Well, let's put it this way: if this was just a standard accounting operation, each movie would be considered a project. And anything that was involved with that would be applied to the amount of the expenses throughout the entire project. Mm-hmm. Whether hours, so like you said, if they said, okay, we spent $100 for a television spot and 15 minutes of that went to the Rise of Skywalker, that would be they would take that 15 seconds, make that a ratio, multiply that by how much money they ended up having to pay, and that would be applied to their bulk project, something like that. That's how normal would be pretty standard for applying that. And this is why sometimes on the budget stuff, it's actually, like I said, it's clever because they can be like, look what we've done. And then to the tax man say, oh no, it wasn't as, or people who have contractual obligations to money. Oh no, I'm sorry, it just didn't work.
Right.
Yeah, we just didn't make any money. And the reason they can kind of get away with that is because if you think about the compounding effects of an expense. So let's say, okay, we went over an hour for shooting because let's say you had to do only 1 hour of reshoots. Well, we know that every person involved with that labor dollar just got multiplied by some factor. It's not one, it's overtime. So it's gonna be 1 point something.
Maybe.
And then and then every hour isn't just like, oh, we used an extra hour of film, that's $50. Or digital time, or machine expense, because you have to remember they're amortizing all the expenses that they have on all the equipment. They're putting hours for things that are hour based. They're putting time use for that, and the labor costs, of course. They're going to be adding the time amount they have to use inside the studios for what they're renting and stuff like that are outside of obligations. I mean, it's amazing what if you were the accountant there sitting and be like, oh, this was just an extra hour. You'd be like, yeah. That extra hour cost $75,000.
Oh yeah. That's why the reshoots. That's why when you see these reshoots, because they're not just adding time to something shooting, that usually it's after something's finished. So they're bringing people back in. They're flying people places. They're having to rewrite contracts or add on to contracts. There might be some extra.
Well, that's add-ons. I'm just saying, even if they were still there that day.
Oh yeah. Well,
it was like, oh, a reshoot. That's
overtime.
That's what I'm saying.
A different thing.
Just that alone is that much extra. Now imagine, like you said, you've finished it all, and it's like, oh crap, our movie sucks. Now we have to take people back on call and other things. Oh yeah. Then the number that you'd be expending would be through the roof.
Yeah. Well, overtime. Oh yeah. When I worked on some projects, they do pretty much anything they can to keep away from overtime.
I'm sure.
So sometimes it's better to end a day early and film another day. Yeah, well, sometimes it's better to film another day and go, okay, cool, we got more done. Actually, per dollar value, to be like, okay, we're shooting an extra day than it is to shoot 3 or 4 hours overtime because everyone can go from sometimes it's 1 point, sometimes it's a 1.5 rate, sometimes it's a 2 times rate. So someone, you're paying someone $500 an hour, $1,000 an hour, which is not a normal. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I'm paying you $2,000 an hour. They work there 4 hours. You just paid them 8 hours. So, and that's plus all the other things that, again, rental and stuff like that. So the interesting thing too, and you can see why, the reason I put these two together, Birds of Prey and Joker, is it shows kind of an interesting disparity of these two movies from the same studio. I don't know if they're the same marketing companies. It'd be interesting to see that. But what's interesting is you look at the difference on it. And it's just striking of what they're going to, the sad thing is Birds of Prey is going to eat hugely into their profits of Joker.
Right.
I guess technically it's a different financial year. So they're probably going, oh, thanks goodness.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a different financial quarter.
No, they may not. They may
be
be
the same year.
No. They'll actually say, no, actually, this was all spent in 2019. So
right?
That's a loss that we have to take.
It's true. You're right. It would be all spent. Yeah, that's true. I don't know.
That's what I mean. Let me tell you, Hollywood, their focus is making lots of money and then basically losing all that money on red.
Well, and that's the thing is
movies,
is
so
people
that they
got
pay
paid.
almost nothing.
People got paid that worked on it. I don't know how they.
That's my point. Yeah. Executive producers get paid. It's kind of like almost like a pseudo nonprofit. They're like, we never make a profit.
Exactly.
It's like, sure, but everyone makes $100 million.
Well, and that's what's interesting when you look at these numbers. That's why I've been kind of trying to put these kind of graphs together, and we'll do some more stuff in the future. Hopefully we'll do more of this kind of episode talking about these number things, because I think it's an interesting element of the business, and it's interesting how obfuscated it is. And that one thing that you never see talked about because it doesn't advantage them, which is my final column, which is the estimate tickets sold. The reason I like this one is it gives a huge estimate into the breakdowns of the population of what's seeing it. So the reason too is because people are, being like, oh no, this movie failed because A or B group didn't see it or did see it. The interesting thing is when you actually look at the numbers and go, okay, we have our population breakdown here. Boom.
Boom.
I'll scroll that. Yeah. When you look at the the population of America, let's say over 18, which I think is kind of the relevant number here. If every person in America that's over 18 went to see a movie, it'd be a $2.3 billion movie, profit-wise or sales-wise. The top number here would be if every person in the world went and saw a movie, make $72 billion. I think that and again, if you look at just the men and women breakdown of just say men and women population, you would be making over $1 billion if just a certain demographic either breaks down when saw it. So when you look at the number and go, okay, in the box office of Birds of Prey, we know that's about a 50-50. It was about a 50-50 split from what I know. I think actually more men saw it than women, but that's not unnormal either. In some movies, it bounces between just people have different tastes. All good.
Yeah, sure.
So about
rom-coms have more women, action films have more dudes. All right, it's just how it works.
Right. So 9 million. If you look at the population breakdown, that's less. So you say 4.5 each. That's a minuscule part of. You're talking less than 10%. Actually, around the range of 5% of men and women. So you're not getting a huge amount of people going to see it. But you compare it to something like along the lines of.
Heck, even Star Wars is the most recent one, even though it was terrible.
Yeah, at least
again, built-in fan base.
Built-in fan base,
and you can see how the numbers all sit within the 100 million mark.
Yeah, so
when you have a built-in fan base,
so let's say 120, so
there.
that's 60 million of each. Again, that's global, so that's even a cheat there. To be honest, when it comes to the Americas, that's even a cheat.
True.
Because if you actually went down to, let's say,
divided that rate instead of by the total, but by the U.S. box office only.
Yeah. So if you said,
just
switched over,
scoot over one.
Yeah. So if I switch this to H5. Oh, I did do that. H5 divided by.
I don't think you kept it as a.
H6. Because I'm.
Oh, you're down one.
No, I want to do. Oh. G.
Just do the one over.
Because I can't do my math.
Can't do my alphabet.
So yeah, that knocks it down to about
3.9 million.
Yeah. So all of a sudden now you're talking about approximately 3.8 million people in the United States saw Birds of Prey. And that doesn't account for, obviously, higher ticket prices. You know, like I said, on average, on an opening weekend where we're at now, I would actually put it more towards $12 as an average. That drops to 2.9. And again, that doesn't account for duplicates. So let's just say, you know, round that to 3 million people. And all of a sudden you're like, wait, only 3 million people saw this movie in America out of a country with a population of 327 million, but again, over 18, let's say 250. And if you want to, you know,
1.6% of the population.
And if you want to say people are interested in movies, you know, go 200 million. So all of a sudden you're seeing numbers in here that you're like, oh, this movie did not hit. Like, regardless of political affiliation, there's more than 2 million people that you would think like the movie. Like I said, the movie, the marketing, everything about it did not entice people to see it. And again, it's just interesting comparing these numbers, like, so especially numbers when it ties into the kind of inside of numbers. Any other insights from you there, Philip?
Well, this is just going to be, you know, I know on the interwebs, there's a lot of discussion about going woke, being broke. And while I hate woke, there's no doubt. In fact, it's just one of the reasons I don't even waste my time watching most movies now anymore. You have to understand the reason that they can do those things is A, the people who actually make those decisions get paid no matter what happens. Even if a movie flops, they have contractual agreements that they're going to make, and they're going to be pulling from those portions. So that's number one. Number two, when you see people freak out, it's going to be people who own companies and shareholders who are seeing losses, and that's what they don't like. But the middlemen in between, they can mix the numbers, and a loss is just a tax deduction as far as these studios are concerned. It takes more. Even a Charlie's Angel, even a Dark Phoenix, even a Birds of Prey, it would take a dozen of those from one studio to cause a problem for a studio. There is money magic that happens behind the scenes, and they can live and flow for such a long time. And then they know, I mean, look, it only took one Joker with basically a 0% fan base because everyone believed, hey, I can't imagine how this movie's going to make it. Well, okay, let's be honest. It wasn't a comic book. It wasn't supposed to be designed like comic book. Okay, people knew this. This was a character abstract.
Well, it wasn't part of a universe. You can say that.
Yeah, okay, well, that's my point. So they had to, so they basically had to build their own fan base around that. I would say there's also not really a universe for Birds of Prey. Yeah, there was Suicide Squad, but let's be honest, that movie was terrible too. I mean, there's a huge difference between making a Star Wars movie like Rogue One when you have a built-in fan base, while it's not a part of the main movies, Star Wars people want to see it, as opposed to saying, well, I'm a Dark Knight fan, I love Nolan, so I want to go see the Joker. It's like, well, they're not even in the same universes. So that just goes to show you where it's the outlier in this entire list where it has no built-in fan base automatically, and it crushed with a small, tiny budget because of good storytelling and good acting.
I agree. And the other thing that when I was researching stuff, and I think I've been thinking this for a while, the people who are really making the money are these marketers, because they're not really doing anything.
No, they're not.
The marketing budget, because I'm sure that they're spending, like, having a guy edit a trailer together probably costs them a couple $1,000s, right? Like, there's companies out there. I know people who actually work for these companies. I don't know what they make. I've never asked them, and I never will, because rude. But if I ever wanted to, I'd be like, hey,
rude.
What's this company make to edit a trailer together, right? They're like, here's some footage clips that we like, and the director does it. It wouldn't surprise me in some of these movies that literally the director or someone who's, when they have their hands on it really tightly, you know, like a Wes Anderson movie. I haven't seen the trailer for this.
Are basically saying, this is what I want.
They're going to go in there and be like, dude, this I want. I know how to do it. Put it together. Throw some music on there. Do it. Do it.
Do it. Yeah, the main expense is just finding the platforms that you want, willing to spend the money on. Yeah. Do you want it at the Super Bowl? Do you want it on YouTube? Are you going to put it on your own?
And that's what's crazy.
Hulu that you own, you know, stuff like that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the marketing cost. That's what's so crazy. You know, you're spending, even if they're spending 50%, look how much money, like just this group of movies here. Let's see, that's still on the screen, equals some, you know, there we go. You know, just for these movies.
1.2 billion?
Yeah, 1.2 billion. Just for these movies on the low end. Just the low end marketing, we'll go at the high end.
Just type over the thing. Oh.
I like that, does that. That's nice. There you go. So between 1.2 and 2.5 billion dollars alone in marketing, just for a handful of movies, and most of these were 2019. We have we have a couple 2016s in here and some 18s. I guess we do 117. That was another successful one that made a ton of money. This is your sweet spot. Like, I know not every movie can be made for this level of money in the current day and age, but if you can make your money, again, Charlie's Angels should have made.
Yeah, some actors' salaries are probably more than
some
that.
movies. I think that I feel like there was the movie that Will Smith was in a Netflix movie, Bright. I think his salary was $80 million.
Oh my!
I think they paid him $80 million straight up for that movie. I think.
Holy crap!
Let me see.
That's ridiculous.
Let me see. Why? I'll look it up really fast just so I get accurate. Right? Will.
It wasn't even a good movie.
Smith. Let me see.
That'd be a real interesting.
I was wrong. Okay.
Discovery.
$35 million.
Okay, the budget of it.
Yes, went to one actor.
Just to purchase one man. I mean, that's ridiculous.
So even Joker, that would have been majority of its budget too. So that's kind of, I messed that up. Oops.
Geez, Joaquin Phoenix, I guess you better start, you need to find a new agent, apparently.
Well,
you could have asked for $35K.
Right, next, if they do a sequel, you can guarantee he's going to ask for that, though. You'll ask for that. Because
I can't imagine a Joker 2. What would be the point?
That's where they'll mess up if they do a sequel or something like that, is then they'll spend $150 million, and it won't be as good, and then you lose money. So that's the thing. This 55, I would say actually the $30 to $60 million budget is honestly your sweet spot for a lot of movies, because you don't have to have, a ton of people see it. I mean, still a lot of people see it, but you don't have to have these massive numbers. When you start hitting these 350, again, like, Rise of Skywalker, it's almost a break-even movie, and that has about 100, I'm going to estimate 120 million movie tickets sold approximately to break even, let's say. That's a lot of people to see a movie with to break even when you're starting to spend this kind of money. Let's say that even in-game, which is the relatively confirmed, they made it's 300 million people and you made $1 billion on it. But even that one's kind of a guesstimate, because that's why the people were comparing in-game and the Joker together, because they were saying, oh, Joker made more profit than in-game. And the reason for that is a lot of times other countries that are foreign do not pay the same percentage. So that 60% is an average. That's how I've used this number. But if you throw China in there, 6.3 billion or 630 million dollars of this global box office came from China, and they usually pay far less out percentage-wise. So they might have only made $100 million from China. You drop $600 for $500 million off this, and all of a sudden, this number here looks a lot closer to the Joker number. And so I think that the biggest, if I was the studios, the biggest thing I would start trying to find is better ways to market things when it comes to movies without spending these huge numbers. Spending these huge numbers is ridiculous.
It is, and you start running into the issue of, it's for everything, the diminishing returns. Like you said, you're looking for the most efficient and effective way to spend your money. Why spend $10 to receive $5 more when you can spend $2 and receive $3? And
so it'll be interesting to see. And the reason we're going to bring this together is because hopefully to somewhat, again, these are estimates. These are based upon kind of industry standard perspectives on numbers of 60%. These are relatively confirmed. The marketing estimates and these things are relatively what the market sees it as. So as 2020, it's kind of crazy. It's 2020. As this year's movies come out, we're going to be able to look at these things and go, okay, what did they do? Because, I think people in general in the audience nowadays are caring more about this stuff because it's pushed so hard against you. In the past, it was like, cool, this movie, yay, there's a quote. And now in the marketing, if you notice, there's a lot of movies that are like, wow, this movie made $1 billion. And you're like, oh, cool. Does that mean I should go see it? And you're like, well, I don't know. I mean, there's plenty.
Don't do it.
There's a lot of
it's a lie.
There's a lot of movies that made $1 billion that I'm like, oh, okay, that's not one I really want to see. Or sometimes there's movies that, look at, again, on the opposite side of it, look at how many Oscar winners don't get anywhere near these numbers. This is kind of the blockbuster category of movies where they're high budget, high risk, high reward. It's kind of the high stakes game. It really, when you start playing up here, you can see that it almost becomes a poker game. Well, I don't know, Russian roulette. I don't know the exact casino game, but you definitely see that there is a lot of risk.
Craps.
Yeah, there's a lot of risk and reward going into it where you can be like, okay, I'll give you $55 million. Go make a movie. and then they end up making 500 million in profit. Or they can be like, here's 50 million, cool, or $52 million, and then, oh no,
we
lost that. Or like I said, in movies like this darkfate stuff, where there $200 million spent on that movie, and no one saw it. Other than the people, like I said, built-in fan base, like you said, people who are diehard, see every type of comic movie out there are going to see that. But I mean, you look at again these numbers. So, you have a $300 million people seeing this movie. Again, tickets sold, so again, people do buy duplicate tickets, so it's kind of
sure. But the bottom line is the ticket was sold.
Ticket was sold.
And that's
it's hard to extrapolate. You could say 10% is duplicate, right? And I think some movies it varies. I feel like more people watch. The only movie that I remember growing up that was like high repeat that was ridiculous was Titanic.
Oh. Sorry. No.
But Titanic had a huge repeat audience. Like I remember people saying like, I saw that movie 20 times. And the only other movie prior to that.
Why?
Oh, I know. It's crazy. I just remember articles about it. And then the other movie that had that kind of repeat level was Avatar. Not the Airbender. The Avatar movie.
That
one had a huge amount of repeat people seeing it over.
Yeah, but that was from in the form. Its domestic box office was not very good. Its domestic
Avatar?
box office.
No, Avatar is huge.
No,
let me double check.
I want to say like 3/5 of it came from the foreign market.
Let me double check.
Teach me.
That movie almost made
What almost made $3 billion.
I mean, with inflation,
it was like 2.6 or something like that.
Still be higher.
But I want to say like 1 point. I want to say the grand majority of it came from foreign.
You're not wrong. It made 700.
I want to say it was like two.
It made 760 domestic.
Million was the box off was local, and then the other 200 million was around the world.
2 billion worldwide. 700.
All right, 2 billion. Yeah, that's a crazy difference.
I wonder. Look.
I'm not saying it, but I mean, if you look at the U.S. box office stuff, yeah, things like Endgame and Infinity Wars. It's true, they built a bunch of stuff up to that, but heck.
Wow,
that can't be right.
That movie did really well in UK.
I mean, Black Panther made
China. It didn't do so crazy in China. 700 million in China.
Stop it.
But interesting, yeah. So we'll have to throw movies like that in there too. In the future, we plan on being able to throw in some level of inflation adjustments because that's again, this is why I like using the ticket sold thing. We'll probably adjust these numbers because these are relatively close. 2016's Ghostbuster.
You'd be surprised.
Would have been.
You'd really be surprised how much even a 2-year difference makes, let alone a 4-year difference makes.
True, and so like maybe this would be like $8, right? So I put that $8 ticket, and you're like, okay, that's an extra 20 million people who possibly saw it, right? So we'll do some adjustment in the numbers here to try to give a better scope of it, because that's where to me the interesting thing is, because that's again why you look at a movie like Gone with the Wind, which is still the highest grossing movie all time with inflation, and you're like, wow, how did that happen? Like, how was that movie still there? So it'd be cool to be able to put some more. We're not going to overdo this chart, but
it's actually still a pretty good movie when you watch it.
You throw in some of these movies. Yeah, we'll throw some of a movie like that. You throw in something like older, start putting movies that are from 50 years ago in here, 80s, with like Back to the Future and stuff like that. And that will give an interesting comparison, because you look at the population of of America, where you hit a point where if maybe there's the point in the world where I speculate that if only 1 or let's say 2 or 3% of the population see a movie, the movie could be financially massively successful, right? You look at countries like India, which has a massive population, and China, where they're trying to get movies in there, but again, there's censorship in there, and there's a high level of censorship and lower return on it, so it's not quite as valuable. But in a market like India, I could see them trying to negotiate higher level returns in there, and if you get a 5% out of India watching a movie, you could be making $1 billion alone in a country like India. And that's what I think.
You're expanding, like we talk about, right? Expanding the pie.
Well, and the cost of making it doesn't change. Now, granted, marketing will change, could adjust, right? You can increase that marketing cost. You're like, okay, I'm gonna spend 100 million in China to market, 100 million India to China, and then 100 million America to market, and your budget might be only 100 million. So now we're paying 300% on that number. But if you're like, oh well, just by a movie showing in a theater, you'll make 200 million in China, it'll make, or
Right.
300 million or half a billion in China automatically and a half a billion there. You're like, oh, we don't even care about the American audience at some point.
And I'm sure
They're thinking about that
I'm
too.
sure marketing in these foreign countries is probably very cheap.
It would be interesting with the cost of that. I'm sure it's a lot cheaper than here because again, I think our numbers are ridiculous. You look at the numbers at Super Bowl where people are spending
Right. Millions of dollars to get
$7 million for a 30-second, a minute spot, something like that.
It's just stupid.
And even when they look at numbers like agencies that have like post numbers for these companies, they get a baby spike for like a day and then it goes back to normal. It's almost worthless.
Yeah, it is.
There was a guy who spent in the Super Bowl, I think spent $7 million for the dog ad. Did you see the Super Bowl? I don't think you did. There was a dog ad for a veterinarian that they had helped his dog with cancer. And I think he spent $7 million to be like, thank you. And my brain went to like, just give them the money. Like, why would you? Like,
right?
Like, I'm not going to go down.
Why would you waste on that?
Like, you do a 5-second spot or be like, hey, can I donate some money to like another ad and be like, in memory of my dog, thank you this thing. But I'm like, just give them the $7 million, let them do something good with it. I mean, that $7 million for
what a waste.
That to me is like, and where did that money go? Nowhere but big corporations that already have a lot of money. Like, where does it go that's valuable? It almost goes in, it's almost like, coming from...
Spend $7 million to talk about children who are hungry in Africa. It's like, why wouldn't you just send that yourself?
There's a lot of better ways to do it. Well, and also you look at too, we have, a ton of, like I said, where does this money go? It's almost vaporware, or it's like vapor money. Like I said, casinos, you're like, okay, people spend so much money in casinos and we know casinos make money off that money, but they're not giving you a product. I mean,
no.
It's an artificial product. They're giving you
in your mind.
They're giving you an experience, right? Right. So you're like, wait, this is like vaporware. I mean, it's almost the greatest scam ever. Like, and that's why the movie thing is interesting. At least they're building a product. But once that product's made, especially with digital distribution, other than paying for server farms, which are in the sense of what it is, insanely cheap, because you're not even transferring for space, right? You could put every movie ever made and probably fit it on a couple 100 terabytes, right?
Sure.
And maybe you have to be an exaggeration. You mean the highest level of resolution movie final product, you probably fit it on a couple 100 terabytes. But especially, let's say any main movies, all you're spending for that's thousands of dollars a year, tens of thousands max. Then they're only paying for the transfer data rate, right, for what people are transferring and downloading the movie and stuff, streaming it.
Sure.
So that's a relatively minimal cost, and that cost is just keep going down and down and down. A couple of years ago that'd be higher, but I mean that's just like you used to be able to go buy buying a terabyte hard drive was like, oh my God, it's been $300. And now you want to go buy a terabyte hard drive and you can pick one up for $40. So,
yeah. And if you want, that can replace with solid state would be around the $300 to $500.
Mm-hmm. And that's coming down too.
Which is
quickly.
incredible.
I mean, that's coming down massively
it's
quick.
incredible.
So that's the same in the storage. So the interesting thing is as movies have migrated from, before they had Blu-ray, they had to create a thing. Now you just go on Apple iTunes or your storefront of choice, pay money, and that goes straight to their things. And I don't know the numbers on post-sale things now. I don't know what the variables on that is through streaming. That's not really this part of this conversation because that stuff becomes a little more murky. Like we'd like to be able to talk about.
You
like
would really
TV shows.
need to have access to receipts.
Yeah,
to do that.
It'd be so cool. Like I said,
you know what I mean, for discounts and when they have a bonus for streaming or when you add extra material or who you're making agreements with Amazon and they sell it for $3.99 or Apple and they rent it for $4.99. I mean, that would be so granular. You'd basically have to be sitting in the accounting department collecting in receipts to really know what that would look like.
Well, and that's like we talk about where we're like, I'll be interested to be able to see what these streaming shows are doing on the network or the streaming networks, Netflix, Apple TV, Disney Plus, all these different ones. And the problem is they don't really see those numbers. So there's estimates out there, there's estimates and stuff. But the difference is they could literally do accurate ones. That's just like the interesting thing that Netflix did, remember? Or you might not remember. So recently they used to do I think it was like a 50% if you watch 50% of a show.
70%.
70% they would count it as watched.
Now they moved it to like two minutes or something crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I was like...
That's stupid.
And I was like, I understand you moving the bar down, but they completely shifted the bar. It was like if you started it and watched...
70% to 1%.
Well, and the argument was like, oh, it counts for shorter media. And I'm like... but
not as a
but
percentage.
it's not a percent. Yeah, and I was like, it's weird they changed it from a percentage, which scales
to a
which
static
scales
number.
to a number. I'm like,
Yeah,
obviously
exactly.
it's designed to
if
do it.
If it's a minute long and you watch 70% of it, that's less than 2 minutes, but it's still going to get counted. You know?
Yeah.
That's just
It
dumb.
was one of those things where you're like, wait a second.
Well, you know why.
Oh, yeah, it counts your views. It's just the marketing. Again, it's the whole thing that we're talking about here, which is it's about perspective.
We get hundreds of millions of views a day, and you think, wow, hundreds of millions of people are watching this?
Yeah, 100 millions of shows watched per day. And then you're like, well, what does watched mean? And they're like, 2 minutes watched.
2 minutes.
Show. You're like, oh, what was it before? They're like, well, if you watch 70%, which seems like a fair metric. Again, I feel like 50%.
I would agree. I think that's
I think
70% of material. That's a lot.
I feel like they could have knocked that down to like 60, 50.
50 maybe.
That would have been interesting to see. I mean, again, it'd be interesting to see again those numbers if you could scale it, right? And this is where their marketing. Again, I don't know how they greenlight some of these shows with the amount of data they're given nowadays. Because you look at what YouTube gives you on the metrics end, and that's like relatively generic data. Like it's good data, but like if you have those the breakdowns they have, I mean, they can be like, oh, this show at this scene constantly people drop out, and then they have the metrics to be like, oh, this same group of people that watch these shows, and they can compare those shows to other. I can't compare what you watch to what I watch, or what video you watched before this video. If you have the control of the back end, you can go, oh, well, they were watching Doctor Who over here, and then they went over to The Witcher, and they turned it off. Oh, that's weird. Then, oh, this person was watching Friends, and then they went over to
How I Met Your Mother.
How I Met Your Mother. The Office, Parks and Rec, and then they watched all of that through, and you go, cool. Well, those shows obviously have a similar audience built in that, like, okay, let's do another show like that. So to me, the amount of metrics they have in their back end is so insanely valuable. I know why they don't share it, because it's, again, but it's amazing that they don't use it more to their benefit, because, again, movies too, where we're like, oh, look at these numbers here, and they're like, well, we don't like using those numbers, and you're like, but those numbers can tell you so much. Now, granted, there are movies who don't do well that are really good movies. Like, it's not a perfect, again, this isn't a perfect barometer of good and bad, but it is an interesting one. Again, because it's to say, oh, every movie that makes a lot of money is automatically good, and every movie that doesn't make money is automatically bad. That's not what these numbers are showing, because to extrapolate that out is a fallacy. You're saying, oh, because this is that. Well, not always.
You just need to look at the Marvel Universe and recognize that. They've made billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, but I wouldn't put them in my top 10 favorite movies if they were just fun little trumps for people.
Yeah, they're fun movies
to watch.
Well, that's like Aquaman, right? A great example is Aquaman. 2018. This will be the last little part here.
Ronan.
This movie made, what, 800 million global. It probably made a profit of around 150 to 200,
which is actually surprising. I was shocked.
But it was a movie that I overall thought was a fun movie. Like, it's not a good movie, but it was a fun movie. Like, you didn't have to there was 2 scenes in it that were really bad, with acting and just choices that were made. But like, in the sense of the story itself, I was able to have fun watching it. I was like, oh, okay, this was fun. It's not a movie and there was some beautiful cinematography in it. There's a couple. It was actually a weird movie because it had some actually really beautiful set pieces in it, and then it would juxtapose it to another scene with some of the.
And then it was claymation, and you're like,
what? So like literally, okay, so, and this will be the end here, and we'll wrap up for today. The scene where
Gumby, what are you doing
The
here?
scene where he jumps out of the boat with the flare, and they do like almost the ant farm shot. That is a cool shot. Like, I saw that, I was like, that's a cool shot. Also, the shot when he's running and they're like the slow-mo through the bell when he's running across the city, and they like zoom out and they're going to the different characters.
Oh, yeah.
That was a cool, like, those are really well thought out, good comic book shot type, any movie, action adventure shots. And then you have scenes that are like the one where he's going to go find his armor from the creature, and they're like in this green screen set or like someone's backyard that they just put some moss on the wall, and then like she shot it, and you're like, and like the character like, we can't go with you, and you're like, why? And they're like,
why?
Because we cannot.
The script said so.
We can't go. And you're like, but why not? And they're like, because the script says so. Stop it. And you're like,
right?
Stand back. And they both like
just come up with anything. You're allergic to moss.
do,
Water makes you break out. I don't know, anything.
And they do that awkward backwards walk that they almost reminded me of White Christmas, where they're like, And you're like, what? And then the other scene too, where they're on the end of the boat dock. But yeah, like I said, but you so you have these mixed scenes of like some legitimately beautiful work, and then scenes that you're like, so did like the C team with no budget and one day to set it up to shoot this? And they're like, yeah, we
Nailed it.
We didn't even try there. And you're like, that's so weird. But the movie itself, the overall, you know, you look at the profit on it, you know,
It's funny.
made money most likely. Again, you know, estimates, but I mean, it was. I would say the $160 million mark is a pretty good.
I said it's pretty high.
I mean, I would say it's a good number
For what it was?
It was pretty CGI
expensive.
heavy. I mean, it was pretty CGI heavy. I mean, that cost a decent
true.
money. You know, I would definitely support when they had to spend money on those things because, you know, like look at Sonic the Hedgehog, which comes out next week, which we'll probably throw in this thing because that'll be an interesting movie. But
That will be interesting.
But the studio that redid the visual effects closed down, so obviously they weren't making money.
The one that closed down was the one who made the first version of
redo.
Sonic? Because that
The
doesn't
redo.
surprise me.
Which could have been the
People who
original
did the redo
but
are out of business now.
yeah, the redo they closed down Christmas. Yeah, I don't know how they break. I mean, that's not the first time. It's notorious for the studios to pay to pay these VFX companies very minimal wages for how much work they do. That was the whole thing that happened like 5 years ago. Anybody who had visual effects on their Facebook put a green screen on there. It'd be like, this is how life is without the visual effects departments. I'm like, yeah, most movies would suffer without that, especially, you know, big blockbusters and stuff. But
Oh, sure.
so, I mean,
Star Wars Rise of Skywalker wouldn't exist. The entire thing was shot behind a green
felt
screen,
like
for
it.
the love
It
of
sure felt
God,
like
you
it.
know.
so, well, that's our breakdown of, you know, our initial breakdown of movies, math, numbers, and stuff like that. We're hoping to do this again soon and try to even give better breakdowns with some graphs, more visuals, and accounting for inflation and stuff like that. 'Cause I think,
Tune in next time
Yes.
for gold.
yes, he wants to do a gold talk. So we'll see you next time.
Good.
Have a great day.